just to throw some numbers, as of May 27th, 2023, there are 6.66 million articles in the English Wikipedia containing over 4.3 billion words, including articles. The total number of pages is 58 million.
Yeah.
Does that blow your mind?
I mean, yes, it does. I mean, it doesn't because I know those numbers and see them from time to time, but in another sense, a deeper sense, yeah, it does. I mean, it's really remarkable. I remember when English Wikipedia passed 100,000 articles, and when German Wikipedia passed 100,000, because I happened to be in Germany with a bunch of Wikipedians that night, and then it seemed quite big. I mean, we knew at that time that it was nowhere near complete. I remember at Wikimania in Harvard, when we did our annual conference there in Boston, someone who had come to the conference from Poland had brought along with him a small encyclopedia, a single volume encyclopedia of biographies. So short biographies, normally a paragraph or so, about famous people in Poland. And there were some 22,000 entries. And he pointed out that even then, 2006, Wikipedia felt quite big. And he said, in English Wikipedia, there's only a handful of these, less than 10%, I think he said. And so then you realize, yeah, actually, who was the mayor of Warsaw in 1873? Don't know. Probably not in English Wikipedia, but it probably might be today. But there's so much out there. And of course, what we get into when we're talking about how many entries there are and how many could there be is this very deep philosophical issue of notability, which is the question of, well, how do you draw the limit? How do you draw, what is there? So sometimes people say, oh, there should be no limit, but I think that doesn't stand up to much scrutiny if you really pause and think about it. So I see in your hand there, you've got a Bic pen, pretty standard. Everybody's seen, billions of those in life.
Classic, though.
It's a classic, clear Bic pen. So could we have an entry about that Bic pen? Well, I bet we do. That type of Bic pen, because it's classic. Everybody knows it, and it's got a history. And actually, there's something interesting about the Bic company. They make pens. They also make kayaks. And there's something else they're famous for. Basically, they're sort of a definition by non-essentials company. Anything that's long and plastic, that's what they make. So,
Wow.
That's if you want to find the common ground.
The platonic form of a Bic.
But could we have an article about that very Bic pen in your hand? Mm-hmm. So Lex Fridman's Bic pen as of this week.
The very
specific instance. And the answer is no. There's not much known about it, I dare say, unless it's very special to you and your great grandmother gave it to you or something. You probably know very little about it. It's a pen. It's just here in the office. And so that's just to show there is a limit. I mean, in German Wikipedia, they used to talk about the rear nut of the wheel of Uli Fuchs' bicycle. Uli Fuchs, the well-known Wikipedian of the time, to sort of illustrate, like, you can't have an article about literally everything. And so then it raises the question, what can you have an article about? What can't you? And that can vary depending on the subject matter. One of the areas where we try to be much more careful would be biographies. The reason is a biography of a living person, if you get it wrong, it can actually be quite hurtful, quite damaging. And so if someone is a private person, and somebody tries to create a Wikipedia entry, there's no way to update it. There's not much known. So, for example, an encyclopedia article about my mother, school teacher, later a pharmacist, wonderful woman, but never been in the news. I mean, other than me talking about why there shouldn't be a Wikipedia entry, that's probably made it in somewhere, standard example. But, there's not enough known. And you could sort of imagine a database of genealogy, having date of birth, date of death, and some certain elements like that of private people, but you couldn't really write a biography. And one of the areas this comes up quite often is what we call BLP1E. We've got lots of acronyms. Biography of a living person who's notable for only one event is a real sort of danger zone.
Oh.
And the type of example would be a victim of a crime. So someone who's a victim of a famous serial killer, but about whom like really not much is known. They weren't a public person. They're just a victim of a crime. We really shouldn't have an article about that person. They'll be mentioned, of course, and maybe the specific crime might have an article. But for that person, no, not really. That's not really something that makes any sense because how can you write a biography about someone you don't know much about? And this is, it varies from field to field. So, for example, for many academics, we will have an entry that we might not have in a different context because for an academic, it's important to have sort of their career, what papers they've published, things like
Sure.
that. You may not know anything about their personal life, but that's actually not encyclopedically relevant in the same way that it is for a member of a royal family, where it's basically all about the family. So, we're fairly nuanced about notability and where it comes in. And I've always thought that the term notability, I think, is a little problematic. I mean, we struggled about how to talk about it. The problem with notability is it can feel insulting to say, "Oh no, you're not noteworthy." Well, my mother's noteworthy; she's just a really important person in my life, right? So that's not right. But it's more like verifiability. Is there a way to get information that actually makes an encyclopedia entry?